Thank you very much, Viola. Good morning to you. Good morning to our viewers. My name is Martina Namvuma-Kavenge. I'm a psychiatrist and I work with Nakasero Hospital.
Okay, you're welcome to the set, and just in a nutshell, what would you call mental challenges? When somebody says mental challenges, in men for today, how would you explain that in our language, our usual language?
Okay, so for the mental health challenges, okay, in men, but they cut across to all age groups and genders, not particularly men, the difficulties that affect one's emotional, psychological, and social well-being. They do affect how a person thinks, a person feels, and how they behave. It could be how they communicate or relate with other people in the society, or at work or in the community. So that's just a nutshell. And with the mental health challenges, with mental health, it exists as a continuum. We do have the normal stress reactions, but then you could also find that there's also the extreme where you have the mental conditions or the disorders, depression and anxiety, substance use and alcohol use coming along. So most times we have the early stages, which could be normal stress reactions, but if they're not managed appropriately, they keep growing and it becomes more severe, maybe that you could end up on the other spectrum of the continuum as well.
Yeah, so when you speak about mental health challenges, how would you separate those from somebody's natural disposition or what their personality is like?
So most times when patients report, they will say there is a deviation from how the person has been acting. Everyone might know that is how they are, their personality issues. But an interesting fact, someone you might say has a difficult character or a difficult personality might also have a story behind that. There might be some trauma that came from childhood, because we know as you grow, that shapes your personality. So all those are to keep in mind. So we'll delve into it with time as we discuss.
It's a very interesting, conversation, and not just the fact that we are talking about men today, but the women watching too. Mental health can be a very, very interesting topic. So let's take a look at the gentleman that we actually spoke with before we came up with this live show. We need to look at his story and see how for him it unfolded and where he is today. So let's take a look at our story. Thank you so much, Derek, for your time. A lot of men are told to man up and stay silent and deal with whatever is happening, just swallow. I have had a variation of words, but which mean to man up and to just stand up and go about your day. What was happening to you that made you understand that truly I am not as fine as I look to people around me, or as people around me may assume? What was that like?
I was raised by a single mom. My dad passed when I was about 5 years old. Couple of siblings. My home was always one that invited other cousins. So our home was always packed, but there was no male figure that nurtured me and made me the man that I've become today by the grace of God. I keep telling people that I literally have to get reminded that I once had a dad. So I guess the void was there from that time. Traditionally, a 13, 14-year-old boy is a man. You've been told you're a man at this point. So biologically, at that point, I started to now find myself, and therein was the void of how ill-equipped I was, or not prepared because of not having a father figure, or that alpha in the room that should guide me and help me to understand how to navigate life. So fast forward, I leave the country and I'm on my own. And then, like life has it, I started to dance Lingala with the world on my own. And it was interesting, which fast forward led me to get detained for about 4 months, and that's where my life now just, like the economy, Kasaija is like mine was. So in there was where life started to teach me the real essence of what it means, because that's when I started to see life. That's when I started to understand myself more. I keep telling people it's in the prison that I found my freedom. Most of us are locked up here. I mean, you can be in when you're in a physical prison, at least you know the gate is there, you can see the gate. When they lock you in your house and they take the key, you can know that the key, all you need is the key. But when you've been locked up in your mind, you're cooked. You know what I mean? So it's when I started to dig deeper and understand the patterns, the things I've dealt with that have been inconsistent and discordant with who I'm supposed to be as a man, as a human being. So yeah, I mean, I hope that is sufficient.
Yes, so further to understand that, what are some of the signs that showed you you were struggling with your mental health, even though a lot of people around you could not see it at all and thought you were just fine?
Many things, obviously, like this begins with the journey of self-awareness. You start to notice inconsistent patterns, you start to notice fears. Like for me, for example, one thing I struggled with was fear of the unknown, fear of venturing out, because the answers that we're looking for are out there, just move. But because I was so comfortable, or because I was so comfortable with the familiar, because fear binds you from the past, it anchors you to what's familiar. So I started to understand patterns about myself that were limiting me. I started to understand that I was in all these prisons, these societal expectations that I had from back home, who I'm expected to be when you're with people, when you're like, do this job, or you know, right now, the high watermark of human achievement is be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an engineer. Right now, half of these jobs are going because of AI. But because at the time, it was the measure of success. Or even right now, it's still the measure here. Globally, things have changed. So all these prisons were limiting me. And I always knew that there was something more to me than these prisons. But I didn't know how to describe it then. It's in those 4 months that I started to now pinpoint exactly what it was that I was fighting against. So basically, that prison was me versus me.
Speaking about coping, I want to take you a little bit back about the 4 months in prison. What was that one thing that kept you anchored? Because I understand being in prison is not easy. You barely have anything to do. No smartphone, no computer 24/7. So what were you doing? What helped you to cope that you can look back and say, this is what kept me centered and kept me sane for the 4 months?
It was very turbulent. The first 2 months I remember particularly were very dark because it's pretty much like the prisons you see in the movies. Like you're in a room with a guy from a different country. I remember the first 1 month, I was in a room with a Pakistani guy. The toilet is there, pretty much like they open the gate at 6 a.m., lock it at 8 p.m. So during the day you're open. You have access to the internet maybe 1 hour a day. Like that experience alone showed me what it means to be alone.
What were some of the fears that were running through your mind when you thought about exposing your new reality of, I feel a bit illuminated, being in prison and finding who I am? What were some of the fears you had in your mind when it came to telling people around you that this is the new me, this is how I feel, and I am different from what you've conditioned me to be? Yeah, what did you imagine would go wrong or right upon exposure of your new you?
We have this illusion that we think that options are there, exist. In that moment, I was alone. It hit me that you can actually get to a point where you're on your own. Where my mom would call me and ask me what's going on, and I could not explain to her figuratively what I was going through. All I would tell her is, Mommy, just be calm. This too shall pass. But even me in my head, I was not sure. You know what I mean? So it hit me that you can actually be on your own.
Yeah, okay, that was bad, but it's good that you actually made it even though you were on your own. Okay, so for your friends and family watching, for my colleagues, your colleagues as well, what sort of support made a difference in your experience and made it easier?
No one was on my reggae. No one, I'm telling you. Even my own siblings, they look at me and say, no, guy, what is this guy doing? What porridge is this? But in my mind, I would look at them and I'm like, if only you knew you're the one who is in porridge, and me, I am not in porridge, your life would change.
For a man watching, what would you say if they are struggling and they don't know where to begin or what to do? What would you say to them?
That's really why I took it upon myself and a team of mine to birth with M3, which is mold, mentor, multiply, to basically cater to the needs of the boy child, to help them get into spaces where they can get molded, to get them in contact with proper mentors, men who are walking the talk, and then ultimately multiply, because essentially we are the answer we're waiting on. In a country that is relatively, predominantly 30 and below, how do we take it upon ourselves and live up and break away from these societal stereotypes and expectations and becomes aware, more self-aware, understand what means to be in a healthy relationship, to become believe in self and all these values. So M3 is a strong space that has been set up to take care of the needs of the young children.
So he talks about not having a male figure in his life to sort of anchor him and guide him around. What do you make of his story?
Yes, so just hearing from Derek's story it also goes back to remind us how with men especially, and why they're a special group, you'll find that their mental health challenges also have are deeply rooted into cultural expectations. You know, you'd find some people, maybe he lost his dad at an early age, and like he tells you, like, man up, you know, you have to be a man, someone would expect you to help. But he was a child, like, come on, he hadn't enjoyed his childhood. He might have not even have dealt with the grief of his father, or probably he hadn't understood it. Being raised by a single mother, there's so many challenges that they have. Remember, they're alone, financial, they have to be there for the kids, they have to work, you know, they have to provide, probably having to also go around to look for resources from family members, which might reject. Sometimes when women have challenges, you find that it might rub off on the men, but on the children as well. So if you're not mentally okay, that will definitely show in your child. For example, he says he had the behavior issues, which even ended up in prison. Maybe had someone guided him or mentored him or tried to understand what things he had been dealing with, he probably wouldn't have ended up there. So that's just a way to show you how things that happen from childhood, their experiences, maybe traumas, can also end up affecting these men when they're older, and how their mental health symptoms might come up when they're much older.
You know, I have a question about childhood. You spoke earlier that it shapes what somebody becomes or how they turn out in adulthood. You have a family setting where you have, say for example, abusive parents. Say they are beating up the children left, right, and center, and these children grow up to become totally different people. So one might become a criminal, and the other one might just become a doctor or a nurse or caring for the elderly. What kind of profile of say a person predisposes them to having behavioral problems or challenges or whatever, being that they're in the same environment? What really happens there that Chris has played?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Everyone they always look at the problem child, or they usually call them the problem child. But remember, children are different personalities, different genetic mix. So yes, they've all experienced the same challenges growing up. However, even the one that you think is the responsible one has a lot of traumas. So you might find with them, yes, they did the right thing, they're the doctor, they're fine. But probably when they have a family, you might find that if they don't get therapy or they don't heal, you might find that those behaviors might turn out in their children. Those are the people you find that have given you everything, you know, or they might hide behind their career, make sure their career is perfect, everything is perfect. They try to make their family perfect. But somehow you'd still find spillovers into the children. There's a social media video that always posts, I think it's encouraging people to go to therapy, where there's coffee and water and they keep pouring and cleaning. The water keeps clearing up with time, so where it's now like, I'm passing on a new generation, non-trauma, no trauma, you know, I'm not going to continue this trend. But in our African culture, we still haven't yet appreciated therapy. It's still a challenge now, and it's very difficult to tell an African parent, you know what, I think I turned out this way because of the things you used to do. And we're very funny, we've turned our traumas into humors. You know, you even joke about it, you're like, can you imagine, this is what happened, and you just joke and laugh about it, but you probably need help, you know? So it's such situations that just go on to show, with a childhood, yes, there's a problem child, there's a responsible child, but they all have the same traumas. They might have turned out different. Of course, the focus would be on that problem child, like, why are they not like this, why are they not like that? But also, we tend to ignore the responsible one. Just to have an honest conversation with them, maybe, you'd also find out that they struggle, most likely with anxiety, you know, so it's...
Thank you for that.
It's a two-way.
So looking at men again, how does, for example, cultural expectation of being masculine or being man enough, or all those terms you hear around social media or anywhere you've been, I believe you've had them because you work with mental health, but how does that pressure to become a certain type of man that is accepted then impact somebody's mental state or mental well-being?
Yeah. So we know that with men naturally, even with the Bible, they're supposed to be providers. Yeah. So they already have that pressure, like, I've grown up, this is the type of man I'm supposed to be successful. So unless, there might not be that pressure needed, but as an individual, I'll probably put it on myself, like, I need to be a man, I need to provide, I need to work hard, I need to have money. But we're also living in tough times. If you look at our economic, the current economic state of the country, the job market, you know, then comes children, then comes a wife. Having to provide for all that, it can take a toll. So if I'm not able to speak out about all the challenges that I'm expressing, I'll probably end up with anxiety, or I'll end up learning unhealthy coping habits. I might end up drinking too much alcohol or abusing substances. You might get into gambling. There was a study recently, I think it was it one of, I think, Daily Monitor published, where you find that 18% have turned to like sports betting to make finances. But in the long run, it ends up putting into devastating debts just to be able to handle with society's pressure. Then you have social media that comes in as well, and competition, where someone's like, I really want to be like that, but you don't know the life that they're living. Yeah. Probably they're borrowing, you know, or maybe I'm just showing you what I want the world to see, but it's not what I'm dealing with. But people forget there are those individuals that also come from well-to-do families where they're given, you know, there's money, so I'll give you the car, and you're competing with those people where it's generational wealth. But
do you think that as a society, because I'm just listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, on the flip side, what would a good society be like for a man to be himself? And also a question is, how is a man supposed to be? Because also we have men that have become, I hear a lot of women talking about men. Men are no longer the same as they were before. Would you say the men before were better, but also in their silence, what was that like for a man? But today's, I just really don't understand when you say that men should be, okay, they should be men, but I really don't know where that would be. Like, where do you rest as a man that is supported and is feeling okay?
Yeah. Yes. So unfortunately, I'm not a male. It would be good to have a male
from your
to have their point of view. But ideally with men, it's okay to say, like, I'm struggling. You know, just open up and have a casual conversation. It's okay to open up, but we don't have that. With the lady
or with the fellow man?
It could be with a fellow man. It could be with a professional. Or it's okay for a man to say, you know what, things are not okay. I think I need help. I need professional help. But most times men will come to the hospital when they're very sick. It's like near admission, or you'd find that maybe their boss somewhere sold them, like, has someone there, you need to go for an assessment, you know, you need to have to go for a review, or you've been forced on leave, or you're not performing. That's when you would see they are coming in. But all those things are avoided. We know prevention is better than cure.
Then wouldn't that speak to the stigma around the men?
Yes, it also has a lot of stigma to do with male. Not generally, even though women put the stigma on the men as well. So it's like, what if I open up and this woman thinks maybe I'm weak, you know, I'm not man enough, will they like me, will they support me? That would be the ideal. It's work in progress. Most of the mental health organizations are doing a lot of work fighting stigma. I mean, it's a topic we're talking about, so that's a positive, it's a plus sign, you know. The newspapers are talking about it, everyone on social media is talking about mental health. That's how big of a problem it has become. It might not be 100 where we want it to be, but we've gotten somewhere. I think we're at, let's say, 40 to 50%.
You said in the extreme, for the mental health challenges, they can go from mild stress or mild stress has reactions to extreme mental disorders. What have you seen to be the most common mental disorders in men in your practice?
Yes, so you find a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. Most of those are the common 3 things that you would find. And we also have a lot of substance use, alcohol use and substance use. You know, Uganda is one of...
Well, I've been seeing it here in research. Is alcohol use or
Yes.
drug abuse or a mental health challenge, or is that a sort of coping mechanism for what you're dealing with?
It's not... It can be a coping mechanism, but it coexists. So there are also mental disorders. Alcohol use and substance use disorders are mental disorders, yes. So I think people tend to look at it differently, but they're also part of the disorders that can present when you don't handle your mental health effectively. And you can see Uganda is one of those countries that is high up. We really like our alcohol. Someone said Ugandans don't live like their problems. If they told you Ugandans had problems, people would be like, no, it's a lie. Because Monday to Sunday...
What's in the danger of someone assuming Uganda, or they don't live with problems, or they don't have problems? Because I think that's masking. It's masking of what's going on. So what's the danger in masking of what is going on? I see a lot of humor on social media. They'll be like, oh my God, my mental health is on 2%. And then people will laugh in the comment section like, this person is doing very badly. They're confessing on TikTok, and then the comment section is flooded with I don't know what. So what's the danger in that?
Yes, and that's like I was telling you, there was also a study done at the Makerere School of Public Health, I think, where they interviewed taxi drivers. And they found like 82% of them had like very high stress levels, but they turned their stress into like humor, avoidance, or alcohol use. Like we joke, so it's like temporary happiness. Like, you know what? I'm not going to. It's not a good thing because it has consequences. You know, even with the alcohol use, it starts off as something mild, but it can end up being something severe where you're not functional, you're having financial challenges, your relationships are being affected, you know, you're not able to work. I mean, the worst of it is you end up with physical complications. You know. Also puts you at a high cost because you're constantly in hospital. So it's not even just the individual, but if you also look at the community and the society in general, it puts a risk of security. So you find that maybe there's a lot of crime that would come for these individuals to have to sustain their habits. Yeah.